So you have to have accountability. And the other one that made the biggest difference as we put these boot camps together, we discovered the one thing that helped was community. One of our values is together we are better.
You are listening to Amplify Your Success Podcast, episode 422. And today we're going to talk to the OG on clutter about how it's affecting your decision making. You ready for this? Let's get started. Welcome to the Amplify Your Success Podcast. Get ready to ramp up your revenue, amplify your impact, and make your mark in the world. This is the show for experts, thought leaders, and service professionals who want to shatter their limits and achieve that next level. You're going to find out from other experts and influencers how they made it. Now, let's get amplified. Hey there, inspired entrepreneurs and business leaders. It is your host, Melanie Benson, authority amplifier to ripple makers and impact-driven entrepreneurs. And today we're talking about clutter and your decision making and really its energetic impact on you as an entrepreneur. I've got an amazing guest lined up. Can't wait to share her with you. I was pretty blown away when she applied to be on the show. And so, yes, very excited to have her on the show. Now, the theme of today is clutter. And we're going to talk about physical clutter, but there's also emotional clutter. There's energetic clutter. And I wanted to just bring to the conversation the clutter of confusion. When you don't have a clear, very specific strategy mapped out and you're kind of flip-flopping around, you're not making clear decisions, you're shooting a lot of things in the air, hoping something will stick, and the energetic cost of that on your business, not just to you, but the confusion it creates to ideal clients. I've been doing so much work with amazing experts these last few years in the Authority Accelerator because I've found that sometimes that lack of clarity is simply because you don't know what it is that your real value you bring to the world. And even though you know what you do is amazing and you're really passionate and driven to make a greater impact, that lack of absolute clarity means you're doing so many things that your offers are cluttered, your messaging is cluttered, your visibility strategy is cluttered with so many things it's not moving the needle. So I want to invite you, if this is resonating with you, to check out the Authority Accelerator. We're about to start a new cohort, and you cannot afford to allow marketing, messaging, visibility clutter to derail you. This is the year of all the years I've been teaching this. I can't think of a more important year to get your messaging, your positioning, your lighthouse, all of that dialed in so that people understand why you. The industry is cluttered. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of trust issues, as I covered in a previous episode. And you are the one that can stand out and be the chosen mentor, the advisor, the service professional, if your message is cutting through and your brand value is clear to your ideal client. So if this is speaking to you, check out the show notes. I've linked up the Authority Accelerator. And at a minimum, I would invite you to go take my ripple making quiz. It's absolutely free. It'll be a good guide for you about where you need to get some clarity and optimization so that your message does stand out and you're cutting through the noise in your industry. If you go to melaniebenson.com/quiz, you'll find that super easy and really fast to take. Now, let's get into today's episode. Welcome back, Amplifiers. Boy, do I have an extraordinary guest joining me today. We're talking about clutter and how to unleash more productivity. I think you can see where today's conversation is going. So let me introduce you to our guest. You may recognize her name. Her name is Barbara Hemphill, and she's founder of Productive Environment Institute and is passionate about helping entrepreneurs and leaders eliminate clutter and accelerate their vision so they're leaving a legacy that matters. Her best-selling book, wait for it, drum roll, Taming the Paper Tiger, helped her launch and grow the organizing industry. a team of certified productive environment specialists, delivers her world-class expertise virtually. So you'll get to know more about Barbara today, but she's a speaker, she's a coach, and a consultant. She's authored several books, and she's even been featured on the cover of the top 100 entrepreneurs. Oh my gosh, Barbara, I can't wait for this conversation. I've been hearing about your work for years. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Melanie.
You are so welcome. So I have a personal love affair with productivity and organization. I love it, and yet it is so hard for my brain to do it on my own. So I can't wait to hear more of your tips today. Um, First of all, we got to start with you were sharing with me in the green room how you got started and literally how you ignited a movement. I mean, this really is a movement of professional organizers.
Mhm.
I Can you share a little bit about how you ignited this work in the world?
Well, I lived in India with my first husband for almost 5 years, and we adopted three orphan children, ages 2, 3, and 4, one with special needs. We moved back to New York City. My husband worked for a nonprofit and didn't make enough money to pay for living in New York, so I needed to bring in income, but I wanted my children to be first. And I decided that the best way to do that was to find a problem in the world that I could solve that people would pay me for on my schedule. And so I sat on the playground listening to what people were talking about. Well, I grew up on a farm in Nebraska, and I'm pretty handy, and people kept talking about, electrical problems and plumbing problems, and we lived in a series of 5 high rises. I thought, oh, I could do like a handy girl service or something, but you have to be a member of the union. So I was like, okay, well, that isn't going to work. And then I heard people talking about disorganization and clutter. I heard people saying, I haven't filed my income taxes because I can't find the receipts, or I'm fighting with my spouse about the clutter that he drops on the counter when I go to cook meals, or my kids' rooms are cluttered, or it's like I wrote Christmas cards, but that was last Christmas and I still haven't mailed them, and just things like that. And I thought, they didn't have my mother and father. Now, what surprises people is that I am not a naturally organized person. I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I'm a musician by training. I'm an artist. I love to start things. I have a very difficult time finishing them. I love the big picture and I despise details. So I can make messes with the best of them. But I grew up in the second floor of a tenant farmhouse, and my father was a farmer. Well, if you're a farmer, you have to have systems. Otherwise, the cows don't give milk and the crops don't grow. So we did systems. And my mother was the executive assistant to the president of a bank. And so we just did things. I can still hear my mother saying, if you're going somewhere, take it with you. And so I grew up thinking everybody grew up with that. And when I became a mother of young children and I would see other people's lives, it's like, oh my gosh. So I took $7 out of the grocery money, which was a big deal because I used to walk 20 blocks because I did not have 50 cents for the bus. And the ad said, disorganized, I organized closets, files, kitchens, you name it, called Barbara Hemphill. And like a lot of entrepreneurs, I had a rough start. I got 3 crank calls from guys trying to pick me up. And the fourth call was from a 55-year-old widow whose husband was a solo practitioner attorney who died suddenly and left piles of paper everywhere at home and at his office. And she didn't have a clue, and they didn't have any children. So she didn't know what to do. She did not know that she was my first client, and I did not tell her. I charged $10 an hour and lived in horror that someone would ask me what made me think I was worth $10 an hour. I went in and saw the piles of paper and I thought, Barbara, what in the world have you done? And then I just thought, well, I'll just start sorting. So I started sorting the papers into piles by I need to talk to the attorney about this and the insurance agent about this and the stockbroker about this. And the question, and to promote what I did, I would speak anywhere that anybody would give me the platform. I was trained as a musician, right? So that's performance. So I just took my performance training and took it from music into speaking. And I would speak at garden clubs and church groups and PTAs and 10 ways to organize your kids, or 10 ways to get organized for Christmas, or 10 ways to organize your kitchen, or 10 ways to organize your files. And then that's how I started the business. And then we moved to New York from New York to Washington, D.C. And I went to the Small Business Administration to ask them to help me start this business. And they laughed me out of the room and said I was crazy, that nobody pays for organizing closets and cupboards. And fortunately, I didn't believe them. And I continued to speak. And I got one client was a real estate agent. I organized her car first. Real estate agents' car is their office, right? And then I did her home, and just it grew. It grew from there. And the book came because the question people always asked me was, "How long do you keep? How long do you keep bank statements, credit card receipts, real estate?" And I didn't have a clue, but I thought, well, there must be a book at the library. And much to my shock, there wasn't one. And so in 1988, I wrote a book called Taming the Paper Tiger, which addressed every single piece of paper that came into the American household. And that became a bestseller. And then that kind of launched this business, which is now the residential organizing industry is now, I think I saw it was like $11.8 billion.
Wow. Well, you literally created an industry, and it's so inspiring to hear you share your story. As you're listening in, when Barbara and I kind of like caught her name, and I was like, I feel like I know that name. And then I was like, Taming the Paper Tiger, what? It's like I read that book when I was first starting in business, and it just revolutionized the way I managed paper. And so I'm really honored to have you here today, Barbara. But one of the things that I think is so important about this conversation is, we have a lot of people who work at home. They work in small spaces. They're finding a little place to set up their office, or maybe one of the things that they're struggling with is they're having a hard time focusing. They're distracted, and there's just so much connection between clutter and our emotional, spiritual well-being, and even like our ability to focus. Can you tell us a little bit about what you see as that correlation between clutter and what that really is coming from?
Well, you said something that just touches my heart, which is I wrote a book called Less Clutter, More Life. And the premise is that physical and digital clutter is a symptom of emotional and spiritual clutter.
Mm.
And I have seen that over and over. The business has been based on 4 words. Clutter is postponed decisions, which I learned from clothes closets. Your clothes closet fills up because you haven't decided whether you're going to lose the 10 pounds to get back into that favorite pair of pants again, or the exercise equipment that looks so good on Home Shopping Network, or the candlesticks you got from Aunt Sally, and you love Aunt Sally, but the candlesticks are not really your style. But when she comes for Thanksgiving dinner, she would like them if they were on the table. And then you have piles of paper, and they're it's on the desk or maybe on the kitchen counter. That's one of the places it goes a lot. It's like, okay, I gotta clean this up. And you pick up the first piece of paper, it's like, oh, not today. Can't do that. Oh, not today. And the next thing, the pile that was on this side is on this side. And then you go to email, and it's like, okay, the majority of the population opens up email, some even before they get out of bed in the morning. Open, close, open, close, open, close, open, close, and nothing changes except 45 minutes later, they feel so discouraged at how far behind they are. Clutter's postponed decisions. But you have to make the decision. But more importantly, you have to have a way to implement the decision. And that leads us to the system, which we use the acronym Saving You Space, Time, Energy, and Money. So then the question is, why is it so hard to decide? And the answer, most of the time, it's always an emotion, and most often the emotion is fear. Fear of making a mistake, fear of forgetting, fear of offending someone. A big one is fear of not being responsible. I do work with companies, and years ago, I started what we now call productivity parties. Back then, we called them file cleanout days, and it was an event that we would create in a company to clear the clutter. And this was before the days of shredding and recycling. And we were cleaning out files, and the employees would say, "Oh, look at all the trees." I'd say, "The trees are already gone. Saving the paper in your file is not helping save the trees." It's like, And one of our premises is the values of our company is today's mail is tomorrow's pile. So every time we're working with people on clutter, whether it's physical clutter or digital clutter or even emotional clutter, it's like we have to stop the problem before we can fix the past. And most people try to keep fixing up the past, but they're not stopping the problem. And so if you do it in paper, it's like the paper's coming in on this end while you're cleaning out this end, which means you never win.
Hmm. I think it's so illuminating to recognize that clutter is often a symptom of internal clutter. And I've been working with entrepreneurs and coaches and service providers, and many of them are about they want to make a bigger ripple. They want to make an impact on this planet. And they have this big vision, but they're not taking action. They're not able to execute on it. Do you see there's a correlation between clearing clutter or even becoming aware of clutter and how we can accelerate our vision into reality?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the services I offer is called Vision Accelerator.
Hmm.
And that's really what it's about because think about it, your ability to accomplish any task or goal is directly related to your ability to find what you need when you need it. And research shows that 80% of what we keep, we never use. And the more we keep, the less we use, either because we can't find it or we don't remember that we have it. And so, but organizing in and of itself has no value. And there are people, we've probably all known people, entrepreneurs are famous at organizing and reorganizing and organizing and reorganizing, but they never get anything done. To your point, Melody, they're not taking any action, they're just reorganizing. So one of the things, we have a 5-step process that we use for people who want to get organized, and it's why. You have to be organized for something. You can't change what you don't measure. So we have to know what it is you want to do and how we're going to measure it. And then we'll be able to go back and figure out how you want to do it. And people often ask us the question, what should I do? To which we say that's the wrong question. The question is, what will you do? I remember one time there was a friend of mine, a really dear friend of mine, who always said, "Oh, you just die if you see my office." And I said, "I don't care, it's your office. If you like it, it's fine." But I could tell that it was really burdening her. And so I said to her, she had gotten a new job. And I said, "Okay," I said, "I want to give you 4 hours of my time to get your office organized before you take this new job." And she declined. That's kind of hard on your ego, you know? And finally, she agreed. She said the reason she didn't accept it was she said she was too embarrassed for me to see her office.
Hmm.
And in her case, it was papers. And I said, "Okay, I don't need to see your office." I said, "Now we do everything virtually, but back then we didn't." I said, "Put all your papers in a box or a garbage bag and bring them to my office." So that's what she did. And we have a proprietary system that we use called the finding system, not a filing system. And we were organizing. And at the end of 2 hours, she was just like ecstatic. And I said, "Okay, I have a question." I said, "What took you so long to accept my offer?" She said, "I've hired 3 organizers in 2 states and paid over $10,000, and I'm worse off now than I was when I started." And so I said, "I have a question." I said, "What did we do differently than you did before?" And she said 2 things. One was, I never realized that my clutter was postponed decisions. So I just didn't know that. And secondly, you didn't say to me, "You should do this." You asked me, "What will you do?" That's the art of organizing and productivity.
Hmm. Well, as you're talking, I'm looking around my office and I'm going, oh, yeah, we got a little bit too much paper clutter. And I know why it's there because I'm like, I don't know what I want to do with this. I don't know what I need to do with it. Right. And I think as you're listening in, perhaps you're starting to hear some clues here about your clutter too. So let's talk to somebody who's now sitting here going, whoop, got too much paper clutter going on. What could somebody do right now to turn things around and start to tame those paper tigers that are maybe causing them to be a little more confused and distracted or overwhelmed than they should be?
Well, the first step is to believe that they can do it. There are so many people who say, oh, I have ADHD, or I'm an artist, I'm creative, and creative people are just naturally disorganized, or, I came from a hoarding family and I never learned it, or it's my partner, it's my business partner, or my marriage partner, and all of that. I mean, there's all these excuses, and they are just excuses. And so first is to say, I can do this. And then it's defining what this is. And we were one of the first in the industry to go to package pricing, because in the majority of people in the organizing industry charge by the hour. And that doesn't work, because it doesn't work for anybody. Because the longer you do it, the more people want things done, but then it seems like it's endless, and it's like, oh, I can't afford this. I can't afford this. And so we said, you got to package up things in a way that you can say, this is what we're going to accomplish in this amount of time, and this is what it's going to cost. And then they can measure it and work on it. So it's believing you can do it. And then it's identifying what success is going to look like, and having something very simple that you can do, that you can be successful at, and then celebrate your success instead of saying, we as entrepreneurs, and women are worse, I think, than most, is we're always saying, oh, but I didn't do that. You might have done 10 things right, or maybe you had a list of 10 things, you got 9 of them right. You don't say, wow, I got 9 things. You say, but I didn't do that. And then we just reinforce that we're hopeless. So we have to celebrate. And the other thing is to recognize whether you really can do it alone.
Mm.
And one of the things, my company, Productive Environment Institute, has developed these boot camps, where we have 2 of them. One's called Office Transformation Boot Camp, and one's called the Digital Transformation Boot Camp. And they're online. We do them in a group, and the results have been so exciting. And the reason is, number one, there's a system. You cannot clear clutter randomly. You have to have some kind of a system. And some people know enough about systems they can create their own, but other people have no clue. So you need to have a system. Second is, you need to have accountability. I mean, who goes to the office and says, I'm going to organize my email today, or I'm going to clean up my files today? In fact, one of the biggest source of clients for me today are companies that have gone digital, but they haven't dealt with the decades of papers before they went digital. They have whole floors and storage rooms full of those. So you have to have accountability. And the other one that made the biggest difference, as we put these boot camps together, we discovered the one thing that helped was community. One of our values is together we are better. And the community aspect takes away the shame part of it, because when you're on a Zoom call with other people that you respect and have done great things, and they're struggling too, it's like, you mean I'm not the only one? Because everybody thinks they're the only one that struggles with this.
Yeah. I mean, you just hit so many points that I see myself and other people who are not necessarily organized by nature, if you will. It's like, really, I mean, and this goes for everything that you're not good at, anything that you haven't mastered. A system overrides your bad habits, basically. Because when you follow a system, you're like, you do the things that work in the right order. So you are speaking my love language here, Barbara.
I always love in the Atomic Habits, he says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Oh, I missed that line. That's a good line.
That's James Clear in Atomic Habits. And when I read that book, it's like, yes,
Yeah,
because it's
that is a
true.
fantastic book, by the way. If you've not read it, it's a fantastic book.
We use the
So
acronym of system of saving you space, time, energy, and money.
I like that. I had a
Every
client.
time, every time there's something you have to do repeatedly, you need a system. And when you do, it will save you energy, time, saving you space, time, energy, and money. It's just happens over and over.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I got so excited because I had a client for many years. Anytime I said the word system, she would shrivel. She's like, no, not systems. I hate systems. And I'm like, it provides freedom.
Well,
So it gives you
and we
more of what
actually
you do want.
we talk about in the boot camp, it's frameworks with flexibility because there is
Hmm.
an art part of it. We get David Allen and Marie Kondo are two very famous people in this area, and they do their systems work. I mean, I know I could work them. I mean, they work. But I've had people say, I tried that for 2 days or 2 weeks, and if that's what I have to do, there's no hope for me. And so it's like figuring out what we will do. And that's why I'm 77 years old. I've been doing this for 46 years. And somebody said the other day, aren't you retiring? I said, no, I am refiring because right now our culture needs to declutter more than they ever had. If we're to amplify our success, we cannot afford clutter.
Okay, we got to lean into that because I think we are maybe talking about lots of kinds of clutter, right? And we look at what's happening in our world right now, the rise of digital tools. We've got the rise of online experiences. We've got so much coming at us. Like I think there was a saying for many years that we've got 1,000 pieces of data that try to get into our brain at any one time. I think it's gone up. I
Oh
think we
yeah.
might have tens of thousands of pieces of information that are trying to get into our brain. It's, no wonder so many of us are overwhelmed, right? Tell us about what you're seeing and how we can address these challenges of what we might even call new age clutter, like all the things that are happening at us
Well,
at
there's a
once.
wonderful book. Leedy Klotz wrote a book called Subtract,
Mm.
and it's so powerful. And he told this story in there that just caught my attention right away. In fact, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. He and his 6-year-old son were playing Lego, and they had two Lego towers, and they were going to put a roof on it. And one tower was taller than the other one. And when the father solved the problem, he added Lego to the short tower. But when the 6-year-old solved it, he took Lego off of the top tower. And Leedy took this experiment around different places and discovered that most of the time, the way we try to solve problems is by adding. And when we do that, we actually add more problems. The way you solve is by subtracting. So we have what we call the art of wastebasketry. And one of the questions, it started with paper, was what's the worst possible thing that would happen if I didn't have this? If I threw this paper away or shredded it or recycled it or whatever, and it turned out I was wrong, what would happen? And is that a price I'm willing to pay? And it's not a moral issue because you can keep everything you want if you're willing to pay the price, but it's a decision. You have to be intentional about that decision. And so it's helping people to understand about being the company productive environment. We define a productive environment as an intentional setting. Another example that I see, I work with companies where there have been mergers and acquisitions. And one of the things that happens there a lot is we have lots of systems. This company used this program and this company used that program. I remember this several years ago. I went into the bank to open an account and I was standing there while this person was filling in all this stuff. And he looked up at me and he says, I'm sorry, I have to enter this 7 places. Well, in the day of technology, that's insane, right? I mean, but that kind of stuff does happen. So there's clutter in systems, and there's clutter because no one has built decision making into training for employees. So I remember we used to have a program, we called it 8-Hour Miracle back then. It would be, I would physically go into an office and sit with somebody for 8 hours and show them how to organize their office. And I was sitting with this one woman, I don't remember what city, I don't remember what company, I don't remember her name, but I remember the look on her face. She said, I've been an employee for 23 years. This is the first time anyone ever showed me how to organize my office.
Wow. Okay. Let's just, I got to talk about this for a second because I know this is something you're so well known for, and that is what what is the nirvana? What are we going for here with a productive environment? Because I think that means a lot of things to a lot of people. And I would love to hear your definition of a productive environment.
It's an intentional setting in which you can accomplish your work and enjoy your life. And your environment is everywhere. It's in your clothes closet. If you get up in the morning to get dressed to go to work and you can't find the pair of pants you wanted to put on, that's not a productive environment. It's your car, if you're in the car and you get stopped for a traffic ticket and you can't find the registration, you don't have it, it's there. It's certainly in digital, and when I partnered for a while with the company to create software that was based on the paper tiger, and unfortunately we came out just about the time that software was going away, and so people didn't want to buy software. But the problem was that people didn't know how to make these decisions. They didn't know how to use what we were, and plus what they would say is, but we're going digital, so we don't need it anyway.
Mhm.
Well, now what we find out, and I see it all the time, is we just have a bigger, faster, hidden mess. If you have 1,000 people, and I was in DC, right? So I went into many times where there were truckloads of documents brought into rooms while people sorted through them, and they would hire temporaries who knew nothing about the project, but they would say, go through these papers and find the documents that have these dates or these names on them. Well, you can do that with temporaries. If you have those documents on computers, on drives, in the cloud, and you need them, you may never find them. And so we now have a bigger, faster, hidden mess. The biggest place your environment is this brain. If your brain is full of, I'm too old to do that, I'm not smart enough to do that, that'll never work, it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, so well said. Well, speaking of productivity and productive environments, I know you have a really, really valuable resource to help people access that level of productivity so their life gets easier. Would you mind sharing with people how they can find that?
Well, one thing you can do very quickly, it takes less than 5 minutes. You can go to productiveenvironmentscore.com, and there's a 15 questionnaire, take you maybe 5 minutes to fill it out. It will measure your productivity in the different areas as it relates to information. And when you fill it out, there's a question on there that says, what's the one thing that would make the biggest difference in my productivity? It's really important that you answer that, because when you answer that question, we have literally looked at thousands of these scorecards, and we can quickly look at your answer and those questions and guide you. You'll get a PDF of what the system of an organized office looks like. But you also can get a 30-minute consultation with somebody to customize that for your office, because we can look at your scores and help you figure out, based on what the one thing is that you want, and look at your scores, and we can point you in the right direction.
Very nice. I love that. So productiveenvironmentscore.com. Hey, we will also link that up in the show notes just to make it super easy for you to go take that quiz and access the blueprint. Thank you for making that available, Barbara. That sounds really valuable. Before we wrap up, this is where I like to help our audience, our Amplify community, get to know you a little bit more. You were very gracious in sharing your story earlier. It was like so inspiring to hear how you came up with this. But I'm curious, you said it's been something like 40 years that you've been doing this work. How, like, what do you see as the ripple you are meant to make in this world from today's point of view?
Well, I mentioned that the residential organizing industry is like $11.5 billion or something. I feel like in the Bible, there's a story of Esther, and there's a thing, you were born for this time in history. I feel like I and productive environment were born for this time in history, because clutter now, it started with COVID. When COVID happened and people had to be at home more often, they were more aware of it. But now it's moved into companies, and I'll give you a very easy illustration. There was a client who had 15 employees. They decided to let go of their business. They didn't need the office anymore. They were going to work at home. And so the co-owners sent everybody home and went back in. The lease was up. It took 2 days to clean all the clutter that was left behind. Well, that clutter was there before, but when they were there, but nobody noticed, nobody understood it. And so one of the things now is that a lot of people don't recognize. So if I'm in a networking group and I'm meeting with executives and they say, what do? I say, I help companies measure the cost of the clutter on their productivity and profitability. Have you measured yours? And I just get this blank stare because it never occurred to them. Never occurred. Mostly because it's men. And the men aren't usually the ones that have to deal with the clutter. They're not usually the ones that do. That's just the reality. And so I believe that this is going to, and now that we can do this virtually and we can do it in teams, so we have this digital boot camp that organizes email. Well, employees, productivity loss from email is incredible. So we can go into a company with this boot camp and teach people. We had one client that had 5 email addresses. She had over 100,000 in one alone. And at the end of the boot camp, she could get it down to 0 inbox once a week.
That's amazing. That's inspiring. Okay. Who else is ready to get to 0 inbox? That's a very big ripple, positive
Well,
impact.
but let me just say, lest people think, I don't even want that. 0 in, and one of the things we talk about in this is like, what is the goal that you're looking for? And not everybody's going. There are people who use their inbox as their to-do list. And that's doable. That is another way to do it. But you have to have, as we've talked about earlier, a system.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, last question. When you look back from today to the beginning of starting this business, well, you've been doing this long enough. I'm sure this has happened several times, but is there really a significant, bold decision that you made that probably terrified you at the time, but now you're like, that was the best decision I ever made?
Well, there have been dozens of those. I mean, just dozens of them. And I've made every mistake that could possibly be made. You know, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars that didn't work out the way I wanted it. But the first one I made was I lived in Washington, D.C. And at that point, you couldn't get a credit card unless you had a physical office for people to charge. Well, I was organizing homes at that point. And I wanted people to be able to put on their credit card, but I couldn't get that service because I didn't have a physical office. But I had a private mailbox on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., and they had a boardroom in there. And so I went to the owner and I rented the boardroom for one day. I got a sign that I put on the door. I hired my best friend to look like my assistant. And we set up my office, and I called the bank and invited them to come to my office. They came to my office and I got a credit card. I can't believe now that I did that. It was probably illegal, I don't know. But it was very strategic because it showed me that it didn't matter how big the block was, that there's some way to get around it.
I think ending on this note, it doesn't matter how big the block is, there is a way around it. Sometimes it's under it, sometimes it's over it, sometimes you dissolve the block, and sometimes you just have to get really flippin' creative. But what I just heard in that, and I want to leave our Amplify community with this, when you are so plugged into your big why, when you know what your ripple's about, no obstacle is ever going to stop you because you're going to be bigger than the obstacle.
Amen.
Oh my gosh, what an inspiring place to end our conversation today. Barbara, I'm so honored to have you here today. As you're listening in, if you have loved the insights and the inspiration that Barbara has dropped with us, please share this episode. Follow her on social media, go get her resource, but most importantly, tell us what was the aha you got from today? And are you willing, using that word again, willing to get intentional about your productivity? Barbara, thank you so much.
Thank you, Melanie. I loved having this conversation.
Me too. Thanks for tuning in today, Amplifier. We're going to keep this conversation going, and I want to hear from you how you're going to amplify your authority and make a greater impact. Before you go, please take a minute to give our show and our guests some love over on your favorite podcasting platform. Subscribe, rate, and review. Leave your full name, and I'll spotlight you and your authority on social media.